I'm going to do my best impression of you.
Okay.
Ready?
Set!
It's go time! Time to start another episode of RFA Insider.
That was Amy and I'm Eugene, and today on RFA Insider we have two stories in the rundown as usual, one from Vietnam and one from North Korea.
And then on How It's Made, we have two members of the investigative team here to talk about the case of a Chinese-American democracy activist who is accused of spying for Beijing.
No. All of that and more coming up on RFA Insider. Stay tuned. You're listening to the RFA Insider podcast, made by two real-life staffers at Radio Free Asia.
If you'd like to send us feedback, there are many ways you can do this.
You can send us an email at insider@rfa.org.
You can comment on our webpage at rfa.org/English/insider. Just click on the episode you're listening to and write your comment below.
Or you can send us a tweet at RFA Insider or visit us in person.
No, don't visit us in person.
Right, don't visit us in person. But anyway, we really want to hear from you.
So tune in every other Friday and we'll take you behind the scenes.
And tell you what the news really means here at RFA Insider. So you were doing your impression of me. Do I really sound like that, Amy?
I hope my impression was somewhat close.
Just wait. One of these days I'll do my impression of you.
Was imitation is the highest form of flattery.
Thank you. But let's get into today's episode of RFA Insider. And, of course, that starts with Podcast Free Asia. So, interestingly enough, today on Podcast Free Asia, we feature no corrections, which is a good thing. But we did get our first comment about a month ago. And, while it was not delivered to us by email, Twitter, or the webpage, we will still answer it. And this is to say that if anybody wants to leave a comment about anything, we will read your comment on the air because we really like to engage with our audience, all five of you. Okay, so this comment comes from Cristiano Almonte 2515 on YouTube, who is reacting to episode 1. Specifically, the Asia Fact Check Lab story about Jimmy Carter discussing Taiwan in 1979, clarifying the U.S. position that Taiwan is a part of China under the very nuanced terms of the One China policy. So, in the comment, first he linked to a video, and the video is showing Anthony Blinken, and we'll get back to that later. Okay, the comment says, "No wonder nobody watches this garbage learn your history. Taiwan was always China until it was taken by a colonizer over a 200-year period. The current artificial independence movement backed by USA money."
Oh, baby's first hate comment.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, I like these. So positive or negative feedback is welcome.
Yes.
Just to say that. Okay, so I find it ironic that he's trying to say that something put out by the Asia Fact Check Lab is garbage, considering that they fact check. Right? So, but let's go through the comment one by one. Nobody watches this garbage, learn your history. Great recommendation. We will, in fact, use history in our small rebuttal here. Number 2, Taiwan was always China until it was taken by a colonizer over a 200-year period. So, actually, I mean, depending on your viewpoint, you can't really say Taiwan was always China because there's an indigenous population there that was not China, right?
Yes.
Okay. But it's difficult to understand what he meant exactly by 200 years. So I had to do a little research, and I found out that I looked at specifically eras where non-Chinese governments had control over Taiwan. So the Dutch and the Spanish had a presence in Taiwan from 1624 to 1683. And that's 59 years. Then you have to include the years where it was a Japanese colony, and that's from 1895 to 1945, so another 50 years. That brings the total to 109 years. But if you want to get to 200, you're going to need another 81 years. So what is he talking about? I had to ask myself. Then it dawned on me. He is referring to the Republic of China's control over Taiwan, which has been since the end of World War II into the present. So that's 79 years. That brings us to 198, which is close enough to be rounded up to 200. So essentially, he's calling Taiwan under ROC control a U.S. colony. And this is going to date me, but if I could insert the Captain Picard facepalm meme here, I would. Or maybe even worse, I would insert the Picard and Riker facepalm, because you're probably facepalming too.
I don't know what you're talking about.
And she actually did just hit her head like me. Okay. Oh, you don't know what I'm talking? You don't know what that meme?
No, so you have dated yourself.
Okay.
Or perhaps I'm dating myself.
Maybe. I'll show it to you later. I'm sure you'll recognize it. But either way, I don't think it's a very effective point. In the first place, if we have to forensically dissect your point to know even what you're talking about. But yeah, no, I don't think that the Republic of China government is really a U.S. colony. That's kind of out there. The current artificial independence movement is backed by USA money. He said that. That's a very strong claim that needs to be backed up with evidence. And remember, the first thing he did was put a video of U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken saying that the U.S. does not support Taiwan independence.
On Taiwan, I reiterated the long-standing U.S. One China policy. That policy has not changed. We do not support Taiwan independence. We remain opposed to any unilateral changes to the status quo by either side. We continue to expect the peaceful resolution of cross-strait differences.
So I'm confused. If you're saying it's backed by U.S. money, why would you link something of Blinken saying that it's not, that the U.S. doesn't even support it at all? I mean, are you saying that what Blinken is saying is garbage and he's lying about it? Or are you saying that what we said, that the AFCL said was garbage? I'm just confused. I'm confused. So thank you for the comment, though. Nice try. Thank you very much.
Yes, appreciate.
Okay. Very, very appreciate. Are you being like the Doge meme?
Much think.
Yeah, much think. All right. I always wonder what voice that was in. Much think.
That's a pretty good one.
Okay. All right, but now it's time to get into the rundown.
Yes.
The rundown.
Today's rundown is music themed, so I'll start us off. Okay, so I'm not sure if you're familiar with this trend, Eugene, but there comes a time in every Asian male pop star's career where your team makes you wear what can only be described as the hot general getup.
The hot general getup.
Yes.
So like a military uniform.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
To appeal to the fans.
Yes, the militaristic fans who
Yes.
just want you to be an authority and tell them what to do, right?
Yes.
No.
So, okay, this recently happened to Vietnamese singer Dam Vinh Hung, who showed up in a suit, a long jacket, one of those like crossbody Sam Brown belts, and aviators to perform at a live show. But some viewers took issue with one of the medals on his chest, which they said resembled a medal awarded to Southern Vietnamese forces during the Vietnam War. The Vietnamese Navy actually commented on it on social media, and they called the medal a ghost of the puppet regime.
Yes, and the puppet regime being the South Vietnamese during the Vietnam War, which ended in 1975?
Yes.
Okay.
So very, very quick background. South Vietnam, which was capitalist and backed by the U.S., was defeated by communist North Vietnam in the Vietnam War. So a lot of South Vietnamese either immigrated or were forced to seek refuge in the U.S. after the war.
Okay.
So Hung responded that the medal was just a fashion accessory that went with his outfit. And then he shared a close-up picture of the medal, and all it had inscribed on it was high-quality garment. So, just kind of like generic phrase. Yeah,
so basically, the way that we tell stories about the Vietnam War is different from the way they would, I assume, right?
For sure.
So the North Vietnamese won, which means that, I guess, the South Vietnamese were the bad guys, and the U.S., I guess, at the time were the bad guys for supporting the South, right?
Right. But like even today, right, a lot of the higher political leaders, they all tend to hail from the North rather than the South.
Yeah, it has had lasting effects. And, when I was a kid, like growing up in school with Vietnamese friends and they had the, multicultural day or something like that. And, you'd have to draw the flag of your heritage or whatever. They'd always put the yellow flag with the 3 stripes. And so I thought that was the Vietnamese flag, but that's the South Vietnamese flag.
I also think it flies in Eden Center, right? The Vietnamese community in Northern Virginia.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, that would make sense because the older people would be, I guess, refugees from that era. But anyway, regarding this story, I actually did know a few K-pop performers, and they don't usually decide what they're wearing. So it's not Mr. Hung's fault. Okay, the stylists always choose the wardrobe for official appearances. So like my friend, his stylist would say, okay, well you should comb your hair in this way, wear this type of shirt, wear this type of pants. Here's the shoes you're wearing. So I think I don't think he's to blame. It's more just they thought it looked cool. His stylist thought it looked cool and put him up in that, and maybe didn't really understand what the medals meant. Right.
Right.
Okay. But that said, I think the damage control here is kind of weak because the offending medal, in my opinion, was not, in fact, the quality garment one, which I did a little research on and tried to find what it was supposed to look like. And it doesn't, I mean, we found a kind of similar South Vietnamese medal, but the more offending medal, however, if one wants to say that the U.S. and South Vietnam are the bad guys, or the ghost puppet regime, was that what they called it? A ghost of the puppet regime, right. Next to the medal, there's one that says, Marine, Semper Fi. And of course, Semper Fi is Semper Fidelis, which is Latin for always faithful. And that is, of course, the motto of the U.S. Marine Corps. So I don't really think that that's much of an excuse to say, oh, it says high-quality garment. So that's not what it's related to. Because right next to it, you have this thing, the U.S. Marines motto there.
Like, you see news all the time about, like, idols wearing clothing or fashion items that appropriate political symbols, like for the aesthetic. So that isn't new.
Yeah.
Although I thought it was interesting because usually they'll pull these symbols from different cultures.
Right.
But I'm surprised his team didn't catch on if it had that much of a buzz online.
Isn't this also from a different culture if you're pulling from the U.S. military, kind of?
True, yeah.
But then again, they're saying that he was pulling from South Vietnam, so maybe not. I'm confused.
But anyway, what I found really interesting about the story was that Hung has also faced backlash from Vietnamese Americans for the opposite reason, which is for supposedly serving as a propaganda tool of the Vietnamese government.
Oh, come on. This guy just can't win with anybody.
This is what my Vietnamese friend said when I asked him about this. So he's super popular in Vietnam in kind of like a very well-known, not necessarily well-liked kind of way.
Yeah.
And apparently he sung political songs while waving the national flag. And this was, I guess, enough for older Vietnamese immigrants to consider his performing in America a political act, the spreading of soft power.
He was flying the Vietnamese flag while performing in the U.S.?
No, just in Vietnam. Just like every now and then.
I mean, come on. Just let him have a career. I don't know. I mean, that seems okay to me. You're in your own country, waving your own national flag. What does he normally sing? He doesn't sing about, how I love the government and they're so awesome. Like, he's not a propaganda singer, right?
Well, that could be debated, depending on who you ask, because he was actually maced on stage while performing in California in 2010.
That's excessive.
So before he even came, a lot of the community protested his arrival and his performance. And the activists who did it said that in his defense, he, quote, protected the Vietnamese community from a representative of the communist regime. And a lot of the Vietnamese American community, or the older people, really stood behind him and tried to defend him.
They stood behind somebody macing him on I don't know, man. That's excessive. That's excessive. I mean, you can shout over his performance, you can boycott it, you can tell other people not to go, you can put up posters that say he's a mouthpiece of the government if you want to, but you shouldn't resort to violence. Come on. That's a little
do not
excessive.
Condone violence.
Yeah. So I'm sorry to hear that happened. That's terrible.
It's okay. He's one of the richest singers in Vietnam. So
there's
no need to feel too bad.
Yeah, so he can cry his hot pepper spray tears into his millions.
Yes. He held a press conference after the attack, and he said, I only sing about love.
Okay.
But the whole story up till now kind of makes you wonder how, I guess, possible it is to remain apolitical as an artist, especially one as popular as he is in places like Vietnam.
Okay. Well, on that note, that's an interesting segue into our next story, which is about North Korea, a music video that dropped in North Korea this past 2 weeks.
Okay.
So this is a new North Korea propaganda song that praises the leader, Kim Jong Un, as a fatherly figure. It's called 친근한 어버이, which means friendly parent, or in this case, friendly father. So let's take a listen.
He has a warm-hearted smile that's like your mother's. He is benevolent like your father. He holds his 10 million children in his arms and takes care of us with all his heart. Let's sing of Kim Jong Un, our great leader. Let's boast about Kim Jong Un, our friendly father.
All right. So that's a pretty catchy and upbeat song, and I'd be lying if I said it didn't get stuck in my head a while I was working on this report, and that, I didn't hum the tune from time. La 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 la. Okay, I won't bore you with more of that. So the main vocalist in this story is Kim Jong. I have problems with RY sounds. You know that, right?
And then, oh no, but it's hard because it follows with the kyung.
Yeah. So if she were South Korean, her name would be Kim Yoo-kyung. But she's North Korean, so it's Kim Ryu-kyung. I notice I have to force that out because I have problems with that. If this song is a big hit, which it appears it will be, then we'll see more of Miss Kim in the future. And I was intrigued, so I watched some of her other stuff, and she's an amazing singer who I really have to wonder what her career would be like if she were born somewhere else.
Eugene is a stan.
Okay, so the music video is also kind of extra. No cap, fam.
I am facepalming for a second time.
I'm trying to appeal
episode.
to the Gen Z listeners out there. Sorry. The video shows image after happy image of North Koreans, people going about their daily lives and singing the song. Has soldiers and police and bus drivers, factory workers, children commuting to school, nurses in the maternity ward, old ladies who are missing their teeth, sailors, surgeons, flight attendants, pilots, and basically every single productive member of society is pumped to sing the praises of their savior, Kim Jong Un. And the production values of this video is really high. Like, everyone looks happy, and it makes the place look like it's really fun and a happy place to live. And you just want to move there because everybody's happy and all the time. And,
yeah, I just want to elaborate on that music video. But just imagine every member of society at their workplace fist pumping and just looking energized. I felt so tired watching that. I was tired and old.
Yeah, so the song contains an instrumental bridge, and during that section, it shows how the song was being made, and the singer and the musical directors and the orchestra, they all look really pumped, and at one point, there's a guy even pumping his fist with excitement as he's listening to the song on his computer. He's really enthused, like, yeah, this is awesome. He looks like what I look like when I listen to the podcast for the first time after I finish editing. Like, yeah, that point landed. Woo! Okay, but another wrinkle to the story is that in releasing the video, they were able to show off several instruments and musical equipment pieces, like synthesizers made by Korg and Roland and headphones made by Sony. All of those are Japanese companies. And so these are possibly violations of sanctions, as these would be considered luxury goods. So Roland and Sony both told RFA that they do not conduct business in North Korea. But by including these things in the video, it could be interpreted as a message to the world that even though there are all these sanctions in place, North Korea can still find ways to get the things that it wants or it needs.
Okay, so it's like a subtle flex on top of being a propaganda.
Hey, there you go with the Gen Z slang.
Yeah.
A flex. Okay. Regarding the video itself, I can't really place it. Somebody said it sounded like South Korean music, but it kind of doesn't. It doesn't sound like K-pop. It's like a big band performance.
Yeah, it's anthemic.
Yeah, like marching band music before a football game.
Yeah.
Something like that. And then the fashion and styling. I thought it looked like South Korea in the 90s, especially the main vocalist, Miss Kim, and her hairstyle. Looked really, really like 90s ajumma chic, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Ajumma
yeah.
being middle-aged lady, even though she's not middle-aged, but that's the way she's styled, I think.
Yeah, I thought it looked like the background to one of those generic karaoke reels that plays that are unrelated to the song.
So you go to the... Yeah. I know what you're talking about. Okay. But on that note, let's wrap up the rundown here. And coming up next on RFA Insider, it's How It's Made.
어떻게 만들었지? 답을 없이 잘해. 怎么做的?
How It's Made.
Today on How It's Made, we're very pleased to welcome Tara McKelvey and Jane Tang from RFA's Investigative Team into the studio with us.
Yeah, the investigative team here at RFA is a relatively new division. It was started at the same time as the Asia Fact Check Lab, which is what we featured them on episode F. But briefly, could you tell us what the investigative team does?
Hi, this is Jane. Thanks
Okay.
for having us here.
Yeah.
Yes, we are a very, very new team. It's about a year old. We're all about delving into stories and leveraging the original expertise and language skills here we have in RFA. We cooperate with different language services, and we also create our own stories.
Yes. We should have said thank you for joining us in the studio today.
Yeah,
sorry
thank you.
about that. So could you tell us some of the, very briefly, maybe 2 or 3 of the major stories that Investigative has broken over the past year?
Yeah, of course. Personally, I was with Mandarin service for 4 years before joining this new team.
Right.
Last year, we did a story about the secret Chinese police station in New York.
Oh, yeah.
And it revealed how, Beijing is using these local diaspora communities to expand its police influence in the United States, keeping close watch to diaspora and even resorting to verbal or physical intimidation.
I see. And so that would tie into the story that we're talking about today. Are there any other interesting stories that we've done with Investigative?
I was just going to mention also my great colleague Jack just did a story about Prince Group in Cambodia.
Okay.
And it highlights Prince Group's and its Chinese owner rise in Cambodia's business and politic landscape and the question it raised.
To explain today's story, which is about democracy activist Wang Shujun accused of spying for the Chinese government. So we have a polished video file starring Tara where she explains it all. So let's have a listen.
Otherwise, every morning you greet me.
That was Shujun Wang, an historian and a democracy activist. Mr. Wang loves American pop culture and the land of the free. But the FBI says he's a spy for China. After his arrest in 2022, my colleague Jane Tang and I wondered, how did someone like this end up facing such serious charges? Prosecutors say this U.S. citizen long lived a double life and called him a master of deceit. He's accused of passing sensitive information about dissidents, people who were supposed to be his friends, onto the Chinese authorities. Mr. Wang pleaded not guilty and says he's done nothing wrong. He admits he talked to Chinese agents, but says it was idle chit-chat. There was nothing classified, he says, or even secret about the information he shared. China has expanded its spy network in recent years, using carrots and sticks to seek more assets. The U.S., in turn, has pursued ever more espionage cases. But civil rights advocates worry they're just going after small-time operators with no real power and may be doing more harm than good. Mr. Wang's trial is set to begin in federal court in Brooklyn in July, and the 76-year-old author faces 20 years in prison. But he still has faith in the justice system and loves his country. So it will be up to a jury to decide, is he a patriot or a spy?
Okay, so that was a very good explainer there. Thank you very much, Tara. I first have to ask here, why was Mr. Wang's lawyer okay with him talking to the press and doing such an extensive piece with you all, especially when his trial is still pending? Because it seems to me that until the case is settled, you really wouldn't want your client to be blabbing to the media because it could potentially, negatively affect the trial.
Mr. Wang is a man of mystery, and certainly that's one of them. Trying to figure out why he does things has been part of the puzzle that Jane and I have faced during the reporting of this story. As you heard, Mr. Wang belted out his own version of Edelweiss from The Sound of Music. He's a showman. He likes to talk. A raconteur, the kind who is always at the party sort of regaling people with their stories. And he certainly regaled us with his stories.
Okay.
He wanted to tell us what had happened, and I think that you will almost certainly see him during the trial talking about what happened. He's a talker.
I see. And the trial is coming up in July, right? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
As we learned from the report, Wang worked as a cashier, and he had little else besides his car, and these were factors which may have made him an easy target for exploitation. So I'm curious about how you perceive this group of disposable assets. Are they victims, oppressors, or somewhere in between?
The idea of disposable assets, people have this notion about spies where they picture them like James Bond, sort of larger than life, jumping out of airplanes. In fact, an organization like the Ministry of State Security, the MSS, or even the CIA, they have a whole different range of informants or assets, as they call him.
Oh, okay.
Some of them are people who are going to be important for the intelligence service, whichever country they're from. Some of them simply gather a little bit of information, do some small favors for them, And then the directors of the intelligence service kind of dispose of them, which is how they get that term disposable assets.
If Wang is found guilty, do you think more such cases will follow under this precedent? Or do you think that his case is intended more like a message or a warning to Chinese intelligence?
Yeah, so on the same day Wang was arrested 2 years ago, 2022, the same day there were 4 individuals were also arrested in different cases. The US DOJ placed his case under this umbrella of cracking down China's transnational repression. The other victims in these cases are also dissidents and democracy activists based in the U.S. So I think transnational repression now is like a focal point for Biden administration, but it also reflects China's ongoing investment in overseas operations by the security apparatus. In some way, I believe, Wang Shujun's case can be symbolize a message that the U.S. government to Chinese police or intelligence communities that operating in the U.S. soil, enough is enough.
So I wonder, though, is this intimidating to like the diaspora community within the United States then?
It is, and it has been. Mm-hmm. So it's like a very long-lasting situation that the diaspora community are facing, especially they're trying to live or pursue freedom here.
Right.
But this is, I believe, it's the first time that the DOJ is looking more closely to these cases.
Mm-hmm. And since we are in Asian American Heritage Month, right, we should really highlight the Chinese American community in this case. And, maybe it's not the greatest thing to be going after every little person for who they have had contact with.
Yeah, for sure. Just like the precedent that it sets. And that raises the questions of, if your family back home maybe is friends with like local officials or so, where do you draw the line?
Right.
But I was curious, since hearing about the 4 other dissidents who were arrested was news to me. Was there something about Wang's case that made it so much more publicized compared to theirs?
I think the fact that he is active in the pro-democracy movement. On the other cases, it was more about harassing the dissident from other community. They were, they have other job. But on this case specifically, he's in it.
Kind of like a mole, right?
Yes.
But I wonder if he was aware that he was being a mole. I mean,
right.
the way the report, which came out today, and I advanced read it, and it's kind of like in some ways sympathetic to him, but in other ways it's saying, well, why didn't you know what you were doing? I mean, it was kind of obvious, wasn't it? So
I'm glad that's your takeaway. I think we're also trying to piece together the puzzle, and and the trial is not there yet. So there will be more evidence to be revealed.
Most of the other reports about his case, they just present the charges against him and then quotes from experts and maybe some of his acquaintances, but they don't really include his own voice or his opinions on the situation the way that this piece does. So how difficult was it to gain access to him for the investigative reporting that the investigative team did, or that you two did?
It was actually surprisingly easy. Mm-hmm. The hardest part of the story was not getting access to the elusive source, but trying to make sense of what the story was about and what he was telling us and untangling that. So it was quite a challenge, but he was a fascinating guide through this universe that he had created.
And you spent 6 months talking with him. Is that correct?
Over a period of time. Yes, in his house and certainly different locations.
Wow, I actually didn't know you spent 6 whole months with him for this piece. So over that time while writing the story, were there any interesting incidents or idiosyncrasies of his that didn't make it to print?
Well, one of my favorite moments with Mr. Wang was when Jane and I met him on a park bench. And every spy story, there's always a park bench
right,
where they sit next to each other and they can have their secret conversations without being worried about overheard or spied on by someone else.
And you have to say a secret phrase while you're sitting and looking in a different direction.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. We didn't do it quite that far, but we were
such a surreal interview when we did it.
And there was Mr. Wang, was right outside the courthouse actually after one of his pretrial hearings or a conference hearing within the courthouse. So he came out. He was very forthcoming. He told us all kinds of different things about what he had done. And the thing that was so surprising about it is at different points in time, Mr. Wang knew the FBI was following him. He knew they were after him because they'd interviewed him. That comes up in the court documents. They had met him at John F. Kennedy Airport when he returned from China. So he was keenly aware of the fact that the FBI presence was part of his life. But he still continued to do the things that many people would consider to be risky behavior, which is having contact with the Ministry of State Security officials and talking to them. Sometimes he reminded me of the character from The Talented Mr. Ripley, this Patricia Highsmith novel. She's a detective fiction writer.
Mm-hmm.
And she talks about, in the novel, Mr. Ripley is a criminal, and certainly that's not the case with Mr. Wong. He's facing trial. But there was a certain kind of glee that Mr. Ripley takes in breaking rules that Mr. Wong also seems to share. There's a line in the novel where Highsmith describes Ripley as risks were what made the whole thing fun.
Okay.
And that was certainly the case with Mr. Wong.
So I guess that in some ways would answer one of the key questions, what was the incentive for him to do all of this? Because it doesn't seem like he's getting a huge payoff or anything from MSS, all right? What did you find to be the incentive for him?
He loved this idea that he could get away with something. Whether it was something big or something small, he found that to be one of the greatest pleasures in life. And it was one that he liked to share with others, tell them what he got away with. So sometimes they were very small transgressions, but you could just see how happy he was. Certainly he never reckoned with the consequences of his actions, meaning simply these meetings that he had with the Ministry of State Security officials. He was astonished at the response, astonished now at facing his trial, and had no real sense about what the repercussions could be.
So I guess in some ways it's kind of like people who are not struggling for money who enjoy shoplifting, something like that, right?
Yeah. Petty theft.
Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to add one thing. Yeah. Throughout this whole process, I just remember one instance that vividly. Wang was bragging to us about how his electronic device under his ankle is very comfortable. It's waterproof and it's free.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, and and we were like, oh, really? Because you would think,
that's not something to brag about, right?
Right. But later on, we found out in the court paper, he's actually submitted affidavits to argue to get rid of it, saying that he has health issue, he doesn't need it, etc. So it's like incident like that make you living in this world of like, how do I make sense of this? What is it? What is true and what is not? And another thing that really struck me throughout this process was he seemed to be living in this life kind of in between. He lived in the U.S. for more than 3 decades now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
He barely speaks English. There's language and cultural barriers, and he doesn't really understand the U.S. politics or environment here, but he also doesn't really quite fit in the Chinese system either.
Yeah, especially because he moved away so long ago, so maybe China has advanced in a certain way. And if he were to go back now, he'd expect it to be like it was back then, and it's not.
Right.
Yeah. So in the report, you mentioned that civil rights advocates say that the U.S. authorities are doing more harm than good by pursuing small-time espionage cases like this one. So why would that be more harmful to go after the smaller cases?
Harmful in the sense that civil rights advocates, other people in the Asian American community, think that they should be going after the spy masters, the people in Beijing who are running these operations, rather than some of these low-level informants that get recruited.
Yeah, my thought was like maybe it would raise paranoia a la COVID scare where, it's like, oh, are you a spy for...
Oh, right, yeah. Or then people would be accusing each other of being spies and trying to do stuff like that. So in this story, so he claimed in an affidavit that someone called Abrala from the pro-democracy organization had double-crossed him and falsely accused him of being a spy. And over the course of reporting the story, you actually discovered that Abrala is somebody who once worked here at Radio Free Asia. And then when you interviewed Abrala, he told you that he never informed on Wang to the FBI. So I am sure that when you discovered it, it was like a major curveball. And so did you feel in any way that part or that aspect of the story complicated things at all? Or
Mr. Wang had said in an affidavit that he filed in court that he had been ratted out or falsely accused, and that his accuser was someone named Abrala. So it was a claim that the prosecutors said was wrong and it had no basis, but it was certainly part of our reporting, and it was one of the many twists and turns that this story took. And it was a fascinating tale.
Okay.
The story had so many surprises.
Okay.
And Mr. Wang himself, I mean, anyone who can build out that, good of a version of Edelweiss is somebody who has lots of things they want to share.
Okay. All right.
All right. So any final thoughts we should take away from this case?
If you think about what's happened here in the United States recently, even last year, remember when the spy balloon flew across America?
Yes, yes.
So everybody, whether they were in Montana or in South Carolina, they could look up and see this balloon.
Right.
Chinese officials said that it was a weather surveillance balloon. FBI, CIA, Defense Department saw it differently. After that happened, everyone realized that the presence of Chinese surveillance, whether it's real or perceived, is something that affects ordinary Americans and really everyone. Afterwards, the defense budget went up 4%, and part of that money was going towards fending off Chinese supposed spy balloons. CIA doubled the resources for the China Mission Center, hiring more Mandarin speakers. FBI opened dozens of new investigations. So whether these claims have merit or not, it is a vivid illustration of how Chinese operations affect ordinary Americans. They change the way we look at the world, the way we look at the skies, and the way we look at the people around us.
I agree. Yeah.
That was such a good wrap-up.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that, so the trial is still pending, so we cannot say that he's a spy. He's an alleged spy at this point. But I would like to thank you both for coming to the studio today and helping us out with this story. It's really great. The story itself has a lot of audio and visual elements to it, and it's been presented very well. So.
We have a great team behind us.
Yeah, definitely.
From creative team to our teams. Everyone is working together.
And you can also click a button and hear Tara read the story too completely. So.
Oh, wow.
So thank you very much for joining us today. For Amy Lee, I'm Eugene Pong. This has been RFA Insider. We'll see you next time.
See you.
All right.